Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm checking out the Eachine Chaser88 from Banggood.com. This is a brushless micro quadcopter that has a frame which is 88mm across, and before I go any further I just want to state that this is a clone of the Flex RC Pico X. I built this one recently on the channel and added the ducts to it that they also sell and made a brushless tiny whoop, so you can check that video out. And for me, this quadcopter is the main one that I'm flying at the moment. You may have seen the video that I did on it where it just has so much punch, and if you're wondering why should you get this one over this one can take a 3S battery, and it's actually a much lighter setup when you build it like this. This one weighs 57 grams in this configuration without a battery, and this one weighs 70 grams, and I'll talk about why that is a little bit later. But yeah, I love flying this guy, and I think you should support the original creators of these things, but if you can't afford to, then that is where Eachine comes along with these very cheap versions of them. So we have got 1103 10,000 kV motors, we have got 2-inch tri-blade propellers there, and we have got 6 amp ESC, so it's an all-in-one ESC board. It does have BL Heli S flashed to it, and this is why you can't use a 3S battery, because 6 amp isn't enough to take a 3-cell battery, so this one is just a 2S model. And then up here we have a Pico BLX board, so exactly the same as the Pico X quadcopter, and interestingly it says on Banggood's site that it has got its own firmware that you must load, but I plugged this in and it just has Betaflight version 3.1 installed on it, so I think they're more talking about the PIDs, but when I plugged this in it just had stock Betaflight PIDs, so we'll take a look at that a little bit later. On the back here we have a LED board and also a voltage buzzer as well, so the VBAT is connected to this, and also the DIN is connected, so the lights do have control functions as well, which you can configure, of course, and this is one reason why it's a little bit heavier. We have this, then of course we have this protector across the top here, and that is to protect the antenna of the camera. So the camera is a 40 channel all-in-one camera, and it has a button on the back there to change the bands and also the individual channels as well, and then that connects at the back here. We have a little 1.25 pitch JST connector, and that sits on a little sticky pad there, which is sitting on a 3D printed mount there. And what I thought was interesting is we have these little O-rings down here rather than standoffs. I guess that is to stop any vibrations or help out with vibrations. Another thing that I thought was interesting as well is on 3 of these motors they have soft mounted them. There is a little tiny soft washer there on all of these motors except for one of them. So I think just a quality control issue there. So this one here does not have it, so actually my motors are sitting at slightly different heights to this one, so I don't know if that is going to cause any issues with the tuning. Hopefully not, but I will try that out in the flight. Also underneath we have got this foam pad here, which is to protect the underneath. I see this on a lot of these bind and flies, but that is going to take up extra weight, and when I try to see if this is flexing, it doesn't flex at all, so I'm not sure there's the need for that. But we also have this band under here as well for the battery, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And you can see here we have an XT30 connector, which for me is a little bit overkill. And again, this is why there's a little bit more weight to this one, because on this one, even with a 3S, a JST connector is fine. You see, XT30 is for 30 amp. We ain't ever gonna put 30 amp through this with a 2-cell battery, so I think a JST connector would have been better than, I mean, it looks a little bit too big. That's just my opinion. So the camera is also heavier as well. This all-in-one is bigger than the one that I used on the Pico X. This is the TX03, so it's more powerful as well. So this one can go up to 200 milliwatt and this one just 25 milliwatt, but that's fine. We don't need any more than 25 milliwatt. Now this is an ARF, which means that you have to add a receiver to it. However, there's only really one receiver that I have that fits. You see, you are given this out of the box with this little Pico connector. It's a 1mm pitch JST. I think it's called SH, but don't quote me on that. And the only receiver that I have that fits that is this FlySky A8S receiver, and that just goes straight in there and produces a iBuzz connection to the BLX flight controller here. So when I went in beta flight, it was all set up already for one of these receivers just to plug in, so I don't know why they didn't include it in the package really, but there you go. You're gonna have to get a separate receiver, and this one works fine. Now there isn't anywhere really to put the receiver other than cable tie on the side here, and also Banggood's website says to do that as well. So your antenna just sticks up the top here, which is absolutely fine. And then of course I'm going to be using my FlySky i6X with this as well, and it's very easy to bind. You just have to plug the battery in, so the receiver doesn't power up unless you plug the battery in. So this is the battery here. It is a 2-cell battery, 450 milliamp, again using the XT30 style connector. So you have to hold down the bind button on this. Actually, that's not correct. You have to switch the TX on first, holding the bind button, and then it will go into binding mode, and then you have to hold down the button on the receiver and then plug the battery in, and then it will bind. If you do it any other way around, it doesn't work for some reason, so it's not like the FreeSky stuff. But once that is done, that is fine, and as I say, it was already set up in beta flight to have iBus and everything, so it's expecting this receiver out of the box. So as well as the battery, you are given a little balance charger to charge it up from, so that's fine, and you're also given some spare props, so no spare batteries or anything like that, but I guess that is fine. You are paying a very small amount for this one compared to the Pico X, but personally I think it's worth the extra money. But we'll see how this one flies anyways, because it is very cheap and I think it may get people into the hobby in a cheap way, so I'm all for that myself as well. So I have set up a couple of switches on the i6X. Now it actually was already set up in beta flight for this switch. It was set up to have acro there, and then angle there, and then acro and also air mode in that position. But I think I will probably change mine to have acro, angle, and then potentially the buzzer, because then on this side I'm having this switch to arm. So if I just go into the menu here and go into setup and go down to the aux channels, so you can see there I have got channel 5 on switch C, so that's this one, and then channel 6 on switch A. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this switch here for my buzzer, I think. So maybe I'll keep the setup the same here and just add an extra switch, because I can do that with the i6X, but of course you can't do that with the normal i6 unless you add the updated firmware so you can unlock all of the other channels. Now you don't get any fancy box with this one. This is just the box that they transported it in, and it's just got this foam here, so you might want to keep that, otherwise you won't have anywhere to store this guy. But yeah, not a real fancy box, I have to say. So with the battery installed, the entire package weighs 95 grams if that information interests you. Okay, so I've turned the exposure down on the camera so I can show you the LED sequence there. So if I put in aileron, then this one flashes yellow, and then other way, this one flashes yellow, and then back, both of them flash. Forward does nothing, and also looks like the yaw does nothing as well. And then if you arm it, they should go from green to blue, so I'll just show you that. There you go, nice blue colour. So here we are in the Betaflight configurator. So yes, this one already comes flashed with a version of Betaflight, which is a fairly stable release. So you can see there it says COM18 at the top there. So I've got the quadcopter plugged into the computer via its USB port. The USB port is very accessible, so I like that. It's sometimes a struggle with these brushless micros, so I'm going to connect to it there and enable expert mode. So I do have the battery connected at the moment, so make sure you have the props off, and that is because in order to have the receiver switch on, you need to have the battery connected. So I have enabled expert mode. Let's go into the ports there. So it's got the serial RX switched on for the UART3, and then if we go into the configuration tab here, we've got quad X, and then we have got a board alignment of 90 degrees, so that's important to note if you want to upgrade anything. We have got D-Shot 600 enabled up here for the BL Heli S ESCs. I have turned motor stop off because I like to have the propellers spinning when I arm. That's just my preference there. And then if we scroll down here, I have changed the VBAC because I tend to find that on these little micros this goes off too early, so I've reduced the warning to 3.2 and the minimum cell to 3 there. And then if I look over to the receiver tab, so we have got serial based receiver. This was all selected out of the box. It was meant for this receiver, and I think they knew that because all this was set up already. So if I scroll down here, we have got servo tilt enabled. I don't know why servo tilt is enabled because it doesn't have a gimbal on it, but there you go. An LED strip is also enabled, so it does have the DIN working on the LED strip. Let's go to the failsafe tab, and you can see here it's set to drop, so that is fine. Let's go on PID tuning. Now, these were the stock Betaflight PIDs. I have just lifted the D up because I tend to find that these micros need a little bit more D than stock, so I'm going to give that a try. I've also bumped up the super rate to 0.8 as well, and everything else I have just left the same. So if I go into the receiver tab here, I'm just going to turn the transmitter on, and you can see there that I have got a bind, no problem, and then AETR for the FlySky channel map there. And then if I go over to the modes, I have got my arming on that 2-position switch that I showed you, and then also I have got over here acro. This is stock, this is, so it goes acro, angle, and then acro and air mode as well. And then down here I have added a aux 4 for the beeper, so I think that should be that one. There you go, that is going off. And then if we go into the LED strip as well, you can see that it's set up for various actions for LED strips. If you've ever seen my previous Eachine QX videos, the LED sequence is very similar to that. And if you want to save this setting, then you're going to need to do a dump on the CLI in order to transfer it over to a new version of the firmware, otherwise you will lose that. So let's go over to the CLI next and then type in version just so you can see. It's using version 3.10 for the Pico BLX. Let's go and take it for a fly. Okay, let's go for a takeoff with this guy. Very windy day today, so I'm in angle mode at the moment. Let's check out the punch. It's not bad at all for a 2S. Definitely not on par with the 3S model that I built, but that's expected. Yeah, it looks like it's wobbling about a bit in angle mode, so have to see how that performs FPV. Let's have a quick go in acro mode. It seems alright. It's so tiny to be doing acro with. Could be testing out that crash defense system if I'm not careful. Hear the beeper going off there, so might need to lower that a little bit more, or it's getting blown around in this wind. I'm very quiet though, just as quiet as the Pico X, which is something that always impressed me. Anyway, let's come in for a landing and let's get and do some FPV with it. So I did struggle to get a perfect tune with this guy, and let me tell you why I think that is. First of all, I think that hoop over the top causes an imbalance. So I'll put my PIDs here. These were the final PIDs that I use, and I couldn't improve any more on that. So what I personally think needs to happen is that hoop being removed and a camera put in place with a sleeve dipole antenna, so that when we crash it doesn't get completely smashed. I think it'd also be a lighter setup as well. I also think that those props may be causing a little bit of the issue as well. Like I say, I have the perfect setup with those 2-inch props that I put on the Pico X, and you could probably use the Aurora 90 props as well on this and probably get better results. Now I am getting a little bit of interference through from the motors, and that is something that I don't really get on my Pico X build as well. So I guess that is this ESC board, just a little bit noisier than the one used from Flex RC, because these cameras have a built-in regulator, so you shouldn't really be seeing any noise at all. So it looks like a noisy system in general. But I have to say, if I was a beginner, keeping it in angle mode and also using the PIDs that I have used here, then I think you could get some fun out of it. You can see I'm still able to do acro here, yet it's wobbling around, and I just think that is a problem with the balance. We've also got that LED strip at the back as well, and that will be offsetting the weight a little bit as well. Now the LED strip is soldered directly on both ends, so I think I'd probably remove that as well and maybe just install a single buzzer, and I think that would make the balance a lot better as well. But you know, this thing is cheap compared to the Pico X, so you know, you can't expect the same quality as you get with that model, but you will get a similar type of aircraft and experience. And I do also think as well that having one of my motors at a slightly different height probably didn't help tuning either. And I noticed that you can actually buy some of those spare washers, so I might go ahead and do that. But other than that, yeah, the camera was pretty crystal clear. This is the EF01 camera, I believe, so those are known to be good cameras. Anyways, like I say, just that little bit of interference, and you can see when I go into a roll there, it sort of puts it off balance, and yeah, it's just not quite the tune that I would like. Now the flight time was about 3.5 minutes, which is respectable for this battery, but on my 3S setup with the Pico X, I get a 5 to 6 minute flight time on 3S, so again, that is what you pay for. And the battery is sagging here now, so I'm going to come in for a landing. I'll put a link in the description to this guy and all the parts that I used as well. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.